Good morning. The title for today is I'm feeling more comfortable in court. Well, yesterday was another court appearance. Once again, the judge complimented me, saying he wished some of the attorneys were willing to do the research. The truth is, I have help. It's also true that I am feeling much more comfortable in that setting. I am moving away from perceiving them as my enemy, which seems to make a huge difference. My experience went right along with the topic here at the Mary Horgna Center last night. Introduction to the art and practice of living with nothing and no one against you, with Lloyd Reiser. It was interesting last night. It was only 3 of us present, which breaks my heart in the respect that I wish people would more people would join us. But we had a beautiful discussion. It was Margie and Lloyd and myself talking about our experience of how our attitude affects the result of whatever our experience is. And each of us had stories of how things changed when we experienced a different attitude, or when we took a different attitude towards whatever was happening. And I'll share today, before I even get into the court thing, I'll share an experience that Lloyd shared and an experience that Margie shared. At one point, Lloyd was in an area visiting, and he had heard that there were youth gangs that would beat up on people. And he was sitting in this park meditating, and he heard a bunch of youth approaching him and talking loudly. And the thought came to him that about the people that were alone getting beat up and having their money stolen. And he decided to go back into the meditation and ignore them. And he said they came up and they were right behind him. And finally one of the young men approached and cleared his throat. And finally he decided, I'm just going to send them the love that I'm feeling here in the meditation. And so he opened his eyes, and the young man was standing there in front of him. And he asked, what are you doing? He says, I'm meditating and sharing love. And he said he was just visioning the love going from his heart into the heart of the young man. And I don't remember all of the conversation that he said that took place. There was some conversation that went back and forth. And he just closed his eyes and went back into the meditation. I know he said, or the kid said, well, that's pretty neat. Maybe I'll try it sometime. And he went back to his friends, and Lloyd went back to the meditation. And he could hear the boy say, what are you doing? The other boy's asking the first boy, what are you doing? And the other boy kept saying, leave him alone. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. What are we doing? Leave him alone. And finally they just left him alone and walked off. And Margie was in an intense argument with an individual at one point, and he was absolutely enraged and grabbed her by the throat and was choking her. And she began to realize a lesson that she had just learned in one of the workshops, that no matter what, you are safe. And she started just, for her first thoughts were, what can I grab to hit him? How can I get him off of me and get him to let go? But then she just started saying, I'm safe, and saying it to herself, I'm safe. I am safe. And he let go of her, still enraged, and punched a hole in the wall, but took nothing else out on her. And of course, I've had my experience with this judge that the first time I appeared before him, and I had, not initially, but when I heard that he had been working for the law firm that I had to bring testimony against in my deposition, I immediately painted a picture of he's going to be my enemy. And that was the time when I was in court and he was, yes, I'm coercing you. I'm definitely coercing you. You have these two choices and either you make one of them or I'll give you the third choice. I'll have you held for contempt of court and arrested. And so I chose one of the other options, waiving the speedy trial and going for a continuance. And waiving the speedy trial is one thing that I don't have that's one right that I don't have a problem giving up, because the more time we can take with this thing, the better it's going to come out for me. I'm beginning to realize that. But in court yesterday, I actually had permission to get there late because the judge, it's a docket call, and the judge always takes care of the attorneys first, which takes about 2 hours that you're sitting and the attorneys are going through their things before they even begin to call the people that don't have an attorney, or the pro se litigants, you might say. So I was actually the very, very last person to go. And when I gave him my courtesy copy of the motion that I had filed, he read it, and that's when he said that he wished the other attorneys were willing to do the research, because he wanted to actually hold a hearing tomorrow. And I said, no, that's not enough time to do the research that I need to do to prepare for that. I said I didn't know that I wasn't going to be able, because they told me I couldn't have a deposition of the police officers, which he actually reversed that, and I do have to file a notice of hearing and a motion for a deposition. So I have to work on that, and I have to get that to them. He said you should get it to the prosecutor within a week so that they have a chance to prepare for the hearing, which I will do. And I do have help. The universe does provide me, because I'm so weary actually of poring over all of the legal stuff. I'm so weary of doing that. I still do it a little bit, but I don't do it as much as I used to. It seems the universe brings me people that have already done the work, although I am going to be still studying some of this stuff, because having the attitude of nothing and no one against me is an interesting attitude. And one of the people that has helped me, he says, look, in the system, he says, most of these people, or many of them anyway, really do want to do the right thing. And they have a way of working within their system, and you can get justice in the system if you understand how the system works. So he's sending me things like jurisdictionary to just educate me. He says, I'm not giving you legal advice, I'm providing you legal education. I'm helping you to understand the system so that you can go into the system and win instead of losing. So the judge was a little bit taken aback by the motion that I filed yesterday. It was a motion to strike from the record all of the testimony that I've given in the case so far. Just strike it from the record. So they can no longer use it against me because I was never read my rights, which is a statute that they have to apply. They're mandated to read a person that they're arresting their rights, with some exceptions, but I was not one of those exceptions. I was not trying to flee, or I was not putting anyone in harm or in danger. And they had the responsibility to read me my rights, which they didn't do, which means everything that I said cannot be used against me because they didn't tell me that. They have to say that. And in fact, some lawsuits or some cases have been overturned in appeals because they left out part of the Miranda warning, just part of it, by not saying that you have the right, when you're questioned, to have an attorney present. They need to be told that they have the right to have an attorney there. And if they don't have an attorney, they don't have to say anything. Well, there's been cases overturned on just that part missing from the Miranda warning. Not the other part. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law, etc., etc. They have that restriction placed upon them, and there are matters before the Florida Supreme Court dealing with that very issue of reading the rights to the person being arrested. Of course, in my case, they did not even serve a summons. I didn't see the summons for 6 months after it was allegedly written. And some of the things in the summons and the statement of the officer in the summons don't even make sense, which is why I called for the hearing so that I could talk to and ask questions of the person who wrote the summons, the person who brought the charge against me initially, because some of what was said there does not make sense. And so I need to question that. And the prosecuting attorney, which is why I went in early yesterday, even though the judge had given me permission to not get there till 10 to 10:30, I was there before 8:30 filing the paper and went up and talked to the prosecutor before everything even began at 9 o'clock. And he told me, no, you cannot have a deposition in a misdemeanor case. But the judge said when there are extenuating circumstances, depositions are allowed. And if he's allowing it in my case, provided, of course, I file the proper paperwork. So I find it very interesting that as I was leaving the court, I was the last person out of the court other than the bailiffs and actually one bailiff only. The other two had already gone by that time, but there was one bailiff left in the court. The court secretaries that were doing the paperwork, and the prosecutor and the judge. And so as I left, the judge waved to me, and the bailiff followed me out of the court into the hall and talked to me for about 5 minutes, because it used to be his job to take care of the summonses and the warrants and things like that. And he says at any given time there's approximately 3,500 warrants in Brevard County that are outstanding. And he said it would be impossible for all of the police officers to carry all of those warrants with them in case they come up against making arrest. Of course, in my case, they came to my house. It was no accident, and they had claimed that they couldn't serve the summons because they didn't know where I lived. Yet they sent me a notice that there was a summons to my address, and he said, if you don't respond, that's when they issue the bench warrant. I says, but I did respond. I responded in writing, and I have it in the court records. I have the paperwork. And he says, well, you have to bring that with you. And I said, furthermore, I did renew my license before it expired. And the state sent it back to me. And he actually was talking to me and having a conversation. And this was the same bailiff that when I appeared before this judge the first time, and I wrote, when I had to sign the paperwork, I wrote under threat and then signed my name with all rights reserved. And the people that were there as my observers said that he scowled whatever he says, whatever you wrote, he scowled as he saw what you were writing. And I wrote that on every place that I was agreeing under threat, because the judge threatened me that day, which was absolutely the truth. But I'm sharing this because I want you to see how the shift that took place in me changes. Oh my God, it's 16 minutes already? The shift in me changes my experience in the courtroom. And I want to share that with all of you freedom fighters. We look at the system, at the matrix, as our enemy. But the matrix is still people. And if we start seeing them as just people that are playing a role, and we can actually see that some of them really do want to do the right thing. They really do. Just like you and me, we want what's right, so do they. And you need to understand the rules of the game that they're playing by, and not go in with a chip on your shoulder, because that changes the whole atmosphere. And when you see them as just human beings playing a role, without a chip on your shoulder, without an axe to grind, it can make a world of difference in your experience. I'm seeing that, and I'm encouraging all of you to develop an attitude of love your neighbor and love your enemies as yourself. Love your enemies and love your neighbor as yourself. I got it backwards, I'm sorry. Because it's so important. It changes the world when we see through the filter of love. Thank you for listening, and namaste.